Hey guys! So I know I took a little bit of a break from making videos, but I'm back and I decided to do something a little different today. One thing about me that a lot of people know, but you may not know, is that I am obsessed with true crime. It's murder. These are just two of my books on true crime and different serial killers, and I really like watching. I like watching these. I like reading these, I like watching documentaries, and I like listening to podcasts about true crime. I decided to do something based on that. And because I am from Texarkana, Texas, I decided to cover the Texarkana murders. The Moonlight Murders. Shout out to Michael Ulmer for making the shirt. I will link his Etsy shop below. It says Sleep Tight Texarkana. So basically in Texarkana, in the spring of 1946, a string of murders went on. The first attacks happened on February 22nd, about 11:45, 55 p.m., one or the other. And it had to do with Jimmy Hollis and Mary Jean Larey. He was 25 and she was 19. So they were parked at a Lover's Lane, which is why you should never do that. Anyway, so they were in a secluded part of this road. Basically, they were canoodling, and about 10 minutes in, a person walked up to the driver's side of the car and shined a light into Hollis's face. It blinded Hollis, and he didn't really know if it was a prank. He didn't know if he was, in trouble. He really didn't know what to do. He thought maybe they had the wrong person, so he's like, "Hey man, I think you got the wrong guy." The attacker says to him, with the light in his eyes,
"I don't want to hurt you, fella. I don't want to hurt you, fella. So do as I say."
He tells them both to get out of the car. And so they both come out of the driver's side car. She just slides over, I'm assuming. And he tells Hollis to take off his breeches. Already getting the party started. Mary's like,
"Hey, dude, take off your pants. We won't get hurt if you take off your pants. Take off your pants."
After Hollis takes off his breeches, his trousers, he gets hit over the head twice with a heavy blunt object. When he gets hit, Mary has told later in an interview that the sound was so loud that she thought that there was a gunshot, but when she found out it was his skull being cracked. Can you imagine hearing that sound for one thing? I can't imagine being in that situation. So the girl, Mary, picks up his pants and gets his wallet and is like, he doesn't have any money, and the attacker doesn't believe her, so he's like, "Give me your purse." She's like, "I don't have a purse," and he knocks her down, and she said it felt like she got hit with a pipe. It was so hard. After he hits her, he tells her to get up and tells her to run, and then as she's running, he's like, "Don't run that way, run the other way down the road," and she's like, "Okay." So she takes off. And as she's running, she can hear the attacker beating and stomping on Hollis. And she's just thinking, "I've got to run and get help." As she's running, she sees this car parked, and she's like, "I've got to see if there's someone in there that can help." So she runs up to the car, looks in, and nobody's there. And as she's turning away, the attacker catches up to her and knocks her down and is like, "Why are you running?" And she's like, "You told me to." And he's like, "You're a liar." And then he beats her and sexually assaults her. Later in some of the reports, they said that he sexually assaulted her with the barrel of his gun, which is nightmarish. She managed to get up and she's just like, "Go ahead and kill me." And she ends up taking off and running, and she thinks that she's being chased this entire time. And when you're being chased, even if you're being chased in a game, you're like, so can you imagine being chased by somebody who you think who's gonna kill you? I bet you run a lot faster. She gets to a road and she's just starts screaming for help. Of course, a car passed her and didn't stop, which of course sucks. But if you think about it, would you stop? If you saw someone screaming in the side of the road? In this day and age, probably not. I may call 911, but if I'm by myself, I'm not stopping. I would be terrified. Mary finds a house and wakes up the owners, and they call the authorities, and they find Hollis's pants 100 yards away. So post-attack, she's taken to the hospital for minor cuts, and She received stitches for a head wound. Hollis, he is hospitalized for a while. He had multiple skull fractures, and he ended up crawling his way towards the road and being able to flag a car down. So the problem was that neither of them saw the attacker's face because he had a white mask of some sort over his face. So they didn't know his ethnicity, they didn't know anything. So they say the mask had looked like a bag and had cut out eyes and where a mouth would be. Example. Which I guess he doesn't have a mouth. So the case was considered an isolated attack, and more attacks were not expected at the time, so it went quiet for a little while. The next attack didn't happen until 28 days later, on March 24th, to Richard Griffin, who was 29, and his girlfriend of 6 weeks, Polly Ann Moore, who was 17 at the time. They were found dead in Griffin's Oldsmobile by a passing motorist. The motorist passed the Oldsmobile. He saw Griffin and Polly Ann Moore in the car, and he thought that they were just asleep. Griffin was found in between the front seats on his knees with his head resting in his hands. His pockets were turned inside out. She was found sprawled face down in the back seat. Griffin had been shot twice while still in the car, and both of them had been shot in the back of the head. She was actually killed outside of the car on a blanket before being put back into the car. In Texarkana, they weren't really prepared for something like this to happen, so they kind of foiled some of the examinations of the body. So they had touched the body before she had really been checked to see if she had been sexually assaulted. After this had happened, with it being only 28 days later, the town was starting to be like, oh crap, something's going down. So the Texas Rangers were actually called in. So there were very few clues left around. There was some congealed blood and some blood spatter and just kind of drops of blood here and there outside of the car and in the car. There was a cartridge shell, a .32 from a Colt, so the gun wasn't on site, so they ruled out a murder-suicide, but it had rained the night after the murder, so a lot of the footprints were washed away. So on Saturday night, April 13th, Betty Jo Booker, who was 15 at the time, was playing her saxophone in her little gig with her band. She didn't finish until 1:30 in the morning on Sunday. She waited for her friend since kindergarten. His name was Paul Martin, and he was 16. Martin was in town. He lived in a place called Kilgore, Texas, and so he was just in town visiting. Booker and Martin both were killed early Sunday morning, and Martin's body was found 6:30 in the morning. He was found lying on his side north of the park where they were at, which was Spring Lake Park, which is like one of the only parks Texarkana really has. I think there's like 3 total. He had been shot 4 times, once through the freaking nose, again through the back of the rib cage and in the hand, and finally in the back of the neck. And her body was not found until later on in the day, and she was 2 miles away from his body. She was lying on her back, and she was fully clothed, and her right hand was in an unbuttoned pocket on her coat. And shot twice, once through the rib cage and once on the side of the cheek by her nose. At first they were saying that the body wasn't abused, but later on they came to and said that she had been raped. There was a lot of rumors about who was doing this, and actually one of the rumors was that a local minister actually turned in his own son, but they were discounted as allegations and not true. Finally, on Friday, May 3rd, sometime before 9 p.m., Virgil Starks, who was 37, chilling in his house listening to his favorite radio show with his wife Katie, who was 36. He had a sore back, and he was sitting with a heating pad for his back. He sat in his armchair in his sitting room, which was like in between the kitchen and the bedroom. And while he was sitting there listening to his favorite show, 2 shots were fired into the back of his head from outside the window. His wife didn't even hear the gunshots. All she really heard was the sound of breaking glass. As she ran into the living room, she saw Virgil go to stand up and then immediately slump back into his chair, and he was dead. So she went to the phone on the wall, picked it up, and was calling for the police when she got shot twice in the face from the same window. One bullet entered her right cheek and exited behind her left ear. The other went in her lower jaw just below the lip, breaking and splintering out several teeth before lodging in under her tongue. She somehow is a badass bitch and got up and managed to get a pistol from the living room, but was blinded from all of the blood coming from her freaking face. So she thought that she was gonna be killed, so she's trying to like go back into the bedroom to leave a note, which I'm just like, how is this girl even thinking of doing these things? Because that would just be like, I'm dead. It's over, I'm dead. So she basically runs into the street after the killer kind of comes through the house and leaves. She runs in the street and she's like, Virgil's dead. And the neighbor comes out and shoots a shotgun up in the air, and he's like, everybody, come on out. But they didn't chase him down the street, they just focused on her. And she actually lived, which is pretty cool. She's badass. Basically, when all of this happened, it sent Texarkana into a state of panic. Places were like shutting down earlier, like everybody was losing a lot of business. Stores were selling out of guns, ammunition, and locks. Back then, people really didn't lock their door, which is absurd to me because I'm a scaredy cat and I lock my door every chance I get. But back then, it was like a small town and everybody trusted everybody, so people kept their doors unlocked. But after this was happening, people were like, no. People were boarding up windows and nailing down windows and doing everything they could, especially once the guy got shot through his window. People were like, oh, heck no. And basically, if you were going to go to somebody's house, you had to call and be like,
Hey, I'm coming over. Don't shoot me. Thanks.
While most of Texarkana was living in fear and hiding, a lot of the youths were going out to the lovers' lanes and parking and trying to catch the killer. And even the cops and some of the officers got in on it and put mannequins in cars trying to lure the Phantom in. But guess what? He was like, nope, can't catch me. Well, basically, in conclusion, this case went unsolved. It's still unsolved to this day. Many people believed at the time that a guy named Ewell Swinney, we're gonna go with that, was the Phantom. He was arrested in 1947 for auto theft. His wife actually said that he had done it, and but by law, she could not testify against him, so a lot of the information kind of went and fizzled out, basically. She later came back and was like,
I didn't mean it.
I discredit her at that moment anyways. But he actually was in prison for a majority of his life and died in 1994 in prison from cancer. In 1976, the movie called The Town That Dreaded Sundown came out, and it was released internationally and loosely based on the actual events, despite the claim that it only changed the names of the victims, which was really a joke because it was extremely loosely based off of all of it. It actually had the Phantom. Remember I said she had a saxophone? What was her name? I forgot. Booker? Something Booker? He had like a trumpet. I think that's what it is. And he had a knife on the end of it, and that was how he killed. Come on. And I think in 2014 they actually had The Town That Dreaded Sundown come out again, which was like a remake, and I haven't watched it. The first one's pretty awful. I'm assuming the second one is too. It was on Netflix for a short while. That is the story of the Phantom Killer, Moonlight Murders of Texarkana. I hope that you enjoyed it. I would love to do more stories like this of my favorite murders or cool things like that, I guess, if you're into true crime. If not, you're probably gonna think I'm a real big weirdo, which kind of am, I guess. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Little spooky, scary time, and something that's kind of cool because all of those urban legends and myths kind of started from Texarkana. Thanks, Phantom. Don't go to that Lover's Lane, you'll get murdered. Ooh. But in Texarkana, people were really getting murdered on Lover's Lane. So, anyways, so hit the like button, subscribe, and I will see you guys later. Bye!